They were waiting for you to speak. You could feel it, the pressure of the pause, the weight of the unresolved air in the room, the eyes on you, the subtle lean forward from the person across the table who had just said something designed to destabilize you. And instead of holding it, instead of sitting in that pressure like a stone that has no interest in being moved, you talked. You explained. You softened. You filled the silence because the silence felt like danger, like disapproval, like the edge of a cliff you needed to back away from. And the moment you spoke, the moment you broke, they had you. Not because what you said was wrong, because the breaking itself was the message, because every syllable you offered into that silence said, without words, what they needed to know, that you cannot be still. That pressure moves you, that the discomfort of being unread is more than you can sustain. And a man who cannot sustain being unread will always negotiate against himself, always settle for less than the silence would have given him, always leave something on the table that belongs to him. The wealthiest men you have ever observed in the room across the table at the head of something are not the loudest. They are the stillest. Their silence is not emptiness. It is pressure. It is precision. It is a weapon they have been sharpening for years while everyone around them was busy talking. Today, you learn to use it. Here is what you were taught. Communication is the foundation of success. Express yourself. Advocate for yourself. Fill the room. That is the lie. Not because communication is unimportant, but because you were taught to fill space as a default, to interpret silence as a void that must be corrected, a problem that must be solved, an absence of connection that must be urgently repaired. And that conditioning, that reflexive, anxiety-driven filling of every quiet moment, has been costing you in every room you have ever entered. Pythagoras required his students to observe 5 years of complete silence before they were permitted to speak in his presence, not as punishment, as training, as the deliberate cultivation of an interior so deep, so settled, so patient that when the student finally spoke, every word carried the weight of 5 years of unspoken thought. Pythagoras understood that the man who has not learned to be silent has not yet learned to think. He has only learned to react. The men who built empires, who closed deals that changed industries, who held rooms that contained the most powerful people on earth, they did not win those rooms with words. They won them with the mastery of when not to speak. Your words are ammunition. Silence is the weapon that decides when the ammunition fires. Before we reach the strategy, you need to understand the biology, because silence is not merely a social tactic. It is a physiological state, and the man who can access it under pressure has a neurological advantage over every person in the room who cannot. When the silence in a negotiation or a high-stakes conversation becomes uncomfortable, the nervous system of the man who cannot hold it activates the threat response. Cortisol rises. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of strategic thinking, long-term planning, and impulse control, begins to lose dominance to the amygdala, the ancient alarm system of the brain. And the amygdala has one instruction: resolve the threat, make noise, move, fill the void, do something to end the discomfort. The man who breaks the silence is the man whose amygdala won. The man who holds it, who can sit in the discomfort of the unresolved pause without his nervous system commanding him to speak, has achieved what behavioral neuroscientists call vagal dominance, the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system that produces calm, presence, and the capacity for precise, strategic thought under pressure. This is the physiological signature of the man the room perceives as powerful, not the man who talks the most, the man who is least disturbed by the silence. The body of the still man is a statement the loud man cannot make. Every negotiation you have ever participated in was decided before the terms were discussed. It was decided in the first silence and in who broke it. Chris Voss, the former FBI hostage negotiator who spent decades using silence as a precision instrument in situations where the cost of a wrong word was measured in human lives, documented something every high-level deal maker already knows and rarely says plainly. The most powerful move in any negotiation is to make a statement, ask a question, or receive an offer, and then say nothing. Nothing at all. Hold the silence for as long as it takes. What happens in that silence is the entire negotiation. The other person, compelled by the same biological discomfort you feel, will begin to fill it. And in filling it, they will reveal their real position, their actual flexibility, their private doubts, their hidden urgency. They will give you, in 30 seconds of talking, information that a skilled interrogator could not extract in an hour of questioning, because the silence is pressure. And pressure, correctly applied, dissolves the performance people maintain when they feel observed. J.P. Morgan was famous for conducting entire meetings in near silence. He would listen. He would observe. He would ask one question, a single, precisely chosen question, and then wait. His counterparts, unnerved by the stillness of a man of that magnitude, would keep talking. Morgan kept listening, and Morgan kept winning, not because he was the smartest man in the room, because he was the most patient. The practical weapon, after your next offer, counteroffer, or position statement, stop. Completely. Watch what happens. Almost every time, the other person will begin to negotiate against themselves, adding concessions, softening positions, explaining themselves before you have said a single word. The silence did the work. You merely held it. He who speaks first has already paid the price of the silence he could not hold. There is a reason the most respected figures in every room, across every recorded era of human history, have been men of few words. It is a psychological phenomenon. Social authority is constructed through what is revealed and, more critically, what is withheld. The man who speaks constantly makes himself fully legible. Every opinion offered, every reaction expressed narrows him, reduces him to a specific, knowable, manageable entity. The room learns exactly where his edges are, exactly what threatens him, exactly where to apply pressure. He has handed them a detailed map of his interior, and the man who has been mapped can be navigated. The man who speaks rarely creates the opposite effect. He is unresolved in the minds of the people around him. They cannot place him, they cannot predict him. And the human mind, confronted with an unresolved figure, attributes depth, attributes weight, attributes significance. What is rare is presumed to be valuable. What is withheld is presumed to be worth withholding. Marcus Aurelius described the goal as speaking only what serves, not what satisfies, not what relieves the pressure of the pause, not what performs intelligence for the room's approval. What serves. Every word evaluated before it leaves, every silence honored as its own complete statement. The man who speaks only what serves becomes a man whose words are never questioned. The man who is silent is not passive. He is collecting. Every word the other person speaks, every sentence, every hesitation, every topic they return to, every subject they avoid, is information. Rich, precise, actionable information about who this person is beneath the performance they are running for the room. Carl Jung wrote that people will do anything to avoid facing their own soul. In conversation, this manifests as the constant production of words designed to manage perception, fill silence, and maintain the carefully constructed image of who they need you to think they are. The man who listens without interjecting, without offering his own parallel story, without demonstrating his own knowledge, gives that performance nowhere to land. And when a performance has nowhere to land, it escalates. It reveals. The mask gets louder and looser at the same time, and the truth underneath begins to show through the edges. The most psychologically sophisticated men in any room use their silence to create the conditions for other people to reveal themselves completely. They become, through their stillness, a kind of mirror. And people, faced with a genuine mirror, cannot stop themselves from showing their real face eventually. The listening man knows more than the speaking man will ever give him credit for. Here is the truth that will cost you something to sit with. Most men talk too much because they are afraid, not of the room, of themselves, of what exists in the silence when the noise stops and there is nothing between them and the quality of their own inner life. Talking is the oldest and most socially acceptable form of running from yourself. It maintains the performance. It keeps the external world engaged. It prevents the quiet in which you would be forced to confront what you actually think, what you actually feel, what you actually are when no one is watching and nothing is happening. Blaise Pascal wrote that all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. He was describing a psychological mechanism so fundamental it operates beneath awareness. The compulsion to seek external stimulation as a refuge from interior life. The man who cannot sit in silence is the man who has not yet made peace with himself. And the man who has not made peace with himself will leak that unresolved interior into every room he enters. Through his words, his volume, his need for the room's attention, his visible discomfort whenever he is not the one speaking. This is the identity shift, not a communication technique, not a negotiation strategy. Who you are at the level of your relationship with your own interior. The wealthy man who uses silence as a weapon is not performing stillness. He has earned it through the unglamorous, solitary work of sitting with himself long enough that his own company became sufficient. That the silence stopped feeling like absence and started feeling like presence. That he stopped needing the room to validate his existence and started being genuinely curious about what the room was actually doing. You are not trying to speak less. You are becoming the kind of man whose interior is settled enough that silence is natural. The man who is at peace with silence has nothing to prove to any room. The practice begins simply, one conversation per day in which you speak less than the other person. Not as a manipulation, as a training. Observe what happens in the silence you create. Watch how people fill it. Watch what they reveal. Watch how your own discomfort decreases conversation by conversation, week by week, until the silence that once felt like falling begins to feel like standing on solid ground. Then bring that ground into every room you enter. The negotiation, the meeting, the confrontation. Bring the silence not as a tactic, but as a fact, the natural expression of a man who has learned that the most powerful thing he can offer any room is the full, undivided, unhurried attention of a mind that is not afraid of quiet. Armed stillness is not the absence of power. It is power in its most refined form. There is a version of you who has learned to be still. He enters the room and does not announce himself with volume. He listens with his entire body. He asks questions so precise, so directly aimed at the center of what matters that the person being asked feels simultaneously exposed and respected. When he speaks, the room stops, not because his words are louder, because they are fewer and the room has learned that fewer means more. He does not negotiate against himself. He does not fill the silences that work for him. He does not perform confidence. He is settled, which is a different thing entirely and a thing that cannot be faked for long enough to matter. Every word spoken from anxiety rather than intention is a moment that did not belong to you. Every silence broken from discomfort rather than purpose is a position surrendered that you cannot buy back. You have a finite number of rooms remaining, a finite number of negotiations, confrontations, conversations in which the silence will open, and the question will be whether you are the man who holds it or the man who breaks. The preparation for that moment does not happen in the room. It happens in the daily practice of being still when everything in you says move. Begin now. What was laid out today, the physiology of power, the negotiator's edge, the authority of restraint, the wound that makes you loud, the practice of armed stillness. This is the architecture, the public map. The deeper work, the specific practices, the psychological frameworks for building the interior that makes genuine silence possible rather than performed, that lives behind the join button. It is not designed for the man who wants to seem quieter. It is designed for the man who is ready to become still. Most won't, that's the point. If you are not subscribed, do it now, quietly, as a decision that required no explanation.